The message arrived without warning. It came through the dark silence of space, carried by a wave of energy that rippled across human communication networks. Every screen on every colony flickered for a moment, and then a single emblem appeared, an intricate symbol made of light and shadow. It was not of human origin. The Galactic Empire had finally spoken. The voice that followed was calm, mechanical, and heavy with authority. It declared that humanity had reached beyond its assigned boundaries. It accused humans of trespassing into restricted systems, of expanding without permission. The message ended with a demand that was simple but absolute: submit to the Empire's rule or be erased from existence. For a long time, there was silence on Earth and across the colonies. People gathered around screens watching the replay again and again. Some thought it was a prank, others said it was a test. But those who worked in deep space intelligence knew better. The signal had come from the Andros Belt, a region long known for strange readings and disappearing probes. It wasn't a trick. It was real. And it carried the weight of an empire that had conquered thousands of worlds before humanity even left its solar system. In the halls of the Terran Accord, a united council formed after centuries of division, the leaders met in emergency session. The air was tense. Some members argued for peace, believing they could negotiate. Others warned that the Empire's message was not a request, it was a threat. The words submit or perish left little room for interpretation. On the far side of the room, the defense commanders watched the message again, analyzing every frame. The Empire's envoy, a towering being made of light and metallic limbs, had spoken with a kind of arrogance that left no doubt about their intentions. Behind that envoy stood ships so massive they blotted out the stars. Humanity had always known that one day it might meet another civilization. But no one expected the first encounter to come in the form of an ultimatum. The Terran Accord debated for hours, but no decision came easily. Across the planets, people reacted in different ways. On Mars, miners paused their drills and listened to the recording on loop. On Europa, researchers gathered in silence around their base monitors. On distant colonies orbiting far suns, children asked their parents what the Empire wanted. No one had a good answer. The first human reply was diplomatic. A calm, polite transmission sent through the same frequency asked for understanding and cooperation. It explained that humans sought peace and exploration, not conflict. Days passed. There was no response. Then came another message, this time colder. It declared that humanity's refusal to comply was a sign of disobedience. The Empire's ships were already on their way. The countdown to war had begun. On Earth, the night sky glittered with satellites and defense stations, each one coming online. Fleets stationed at the edge of the solar system began moving toward strategic points. The humans had no illusions about what was coming. They were facing an empire older and larger than any civilization they could imagine. But history had taught them one thing: humans never surrendered easily. In a remote command center buried beneath the ice of Antarctica, officers studied maps of the known galaxy. They could see the Empire's path, a line of red systems expanding toward human space. No one knew how powerful their weapons were, or how many ships they had. All they knew was that the Empire expected instant obedience, and that was something humans could never give. The days that followed were filled with unease. People tried to continue their lives, but the thought of what might come hung over every city and colony. News channels replayed the Empire's warning, while experts argued whether resistance was even possible. But among the common people, a quiet determination began to rise. Humanity had been threatened before, by wars, disasters, and their own mistakes. Each time they had rebuilt, adapted, and endured. This would be no different. On the Moon, workers reinforced the defense stations. In orbit around Mars, shipyards worked without rest, building new warships at record speed. On Earth, the great AI cores that managed global defense systems were activated, calculating every possible scenario. Still, even with all their preparation, fear lingered. No one had seen the Empire's full strength yet. The first contact had shown only a glimpse of their power. Some whispered that their ships were the size of continents, capable of destroying worlds with a single strike. The Terran Accord sent one final message, a direct transmission addressed to the Empire's high command. It stated that humanity would not submit, but it would not attack either. It would defend itself if provoked. The message ended with a simple phrase, "We stand our ground." The Empire's reply came hours later, brief and sharp. "Then you stand in defiance. You will be taught your place." After that, all communication ceased. The Empire had made its decision. At the edges of human space, the first strange readings began to appear. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving toward the Vega Gate, the key transit point between human territory and the wider galaxy. The size of the incoming fleet was beyond anything ever recorded. Panic spread across the colonies closest to the border. Evacuation ships began loading civilians, while military transports moved in the opposite direction, toward danger. The human fleet formed up along the Vega line, silent and ready. The commander in charge gave no speeches. He simply stood at the front of the operations deck, watching the approaching storm on his tactical display. Around him, crew members worked with calm precision. No one spoke of fear. They all knew what was at stake. When the first Imperial ship appeared, it looked like a mountain of metal and light. Its hull shimmered with strange symbols, and its weapons hummed with energy that no human science could explain. Behind it came hundreds more, stretching into the darkness like a swarm of stars. The Empire's commander sent one last transmission to the human fleet. "Submit now, and you may be allowed to serve. Resist, and you will be erased." There was no reply. The silence that followed lasted less than a minute. Then, one by one, the human ships powered up their weapons. Their engines flared, casting a soft blue glow across the void. On Earth and across the colonies, people watched in silence as their fleet faced the greatest power in the galaxy. For the first time in history, humanity stood united, not as nations, but as one species. In that unity, fear transformed into strength. The Empire had demanded compliance. What they received instead was the quiet readiness of a people who had faced extinction before and survived. Humanity had no ancient gods, no divine shields. What they had was will and fire. As the Imperial fleet advanced, the stars themselves seemed to dim under their presence. Yet in the heart of that darkness, humanity's courage burned brighter than ever. No one knew who fired the first shot. Some say it was the Empire, unleashing a beam of energy that lit up the Vega system like a newborn sun. Others believe it was a human ship, striking first out of defiance. All that mattered was what happened next, the beginning of a war that would shake the galaxy. And in that moment, as explosions rippled across the void and the first ships vanished into light, the Empire learned the first truth about Earth's people. They would never kneel. The battle at Vega Gate changed everything. What began as a one-sided attack turned into something the Empire had never imagined. When the Imperial fleet fired its first wave, they expected humanity to crumble instantly, but instead of retreating, the human ships moved in perfect coordination, dodging energy blasts and countering with deadly accuracy. Every maneuver looked planned, practiced, and precise. It was as if the humans had been preparing for this moment their entire existence. The first minutes were chaos. Dozens of smaller defense ships were destroyed, but they did not go down quietly. Each one fought until the last second, buying time for the larger human dreadnoughts to position themselves. When those giants arrived, the battle took a sharp turn. The lead human warship opened fire with a weapon so powerful that it shattered the Empire's front formation. A single beam tore through armor that had been thought indestructible. The Empire's commanders froze for a brief moment, shocked that such a strike had come from what they considered a lesser species. From Earth to Mars to the outer colonies, people watched in silence as the battle unfolded through live feeds. No one breathed as explosions filled the black sky. The Empire had expected humans to beg for mercy. Instead, they saw defiance written in every shot fired. The Empire's second wave came swiftly, thousands of ships pushing into human space. Their formation was flawless, but humans had something they didn't: instinct. They adapted fast, changing tactics in real time. Human pilots used clever tricks, drawing enemy ships into traps, using the asteroid fields as shields, and sacrificing unmanned drones to confuse enemy sensors. The Empire fought with cold discipline. Humans fought with passion and creativity. By the end of the first day, the Vega system was a graveyard of burning ships. Neither side claimed victory, but one truth was clear: the Empire had underestimated humanity. In the following days, The Terran Accord held emergency sessions to assess the situation. Reports flooded in, some good, most grim. Humanity had lost many ships, but morale was unbroken. Across the colonies, volunteers signed up to join the defense fleets. Engineers worked around the clock, improving weapons and rebuilding what was lost. Scientists shared every discovery instantly. Without secrecy, without ego, humanity had never been this united. The Empire, on the other hand, began to grow uneasy. Their scouts reported strange readings from human space, energy patterns and weapon signatures that didn't match known technologies. The Empire had ruled for ages, crushing every uprising and rebellion, yet this was different. The humans were not running. They were learning, adapting, evolving faster than anyone thought possible. The Imperial High Command decided to send a warning to the humans, a final chance to surrender. They transmitted a message that echoed across the systems. You are facing forces beyond comprehension. Yield now and we may spare your worlds. The Terran Accord replied with only 3 words. We do not comply. That simple statement spread like wildfire. Every colony, every outpost, every soldier repeated it. It became a promise, a symbol of unbreakable will. The Empire's second offensive began soon after. This time they sent their elite armadas, commanded by their most experienced generals. They arrived in formation, their ships glowing with energy so intense that entire moons were vaporized during entry. Their confidence was restored. They would crush the human resistance once and for all. But the humans were ready. When the Imperial fleet entered the system, they were greeted by silence. Empty space. No visible defense lines, no fleets waiting. For a moment, the Empire believed the humans had retreated. Then, without warning, hundreds of hidden human ships uncloaked from behind planetary shadows and asteroid belts. The trap closed in seconds. Human vessels attacked from every direction, striking engines, communication hubs, and power cores. The Empire's ships tried to form up, but confusion spread fast. The humans were using new tactics, ones the Empire had never seen. Smaller human vessels darted in and out of range, cutting through massive ships like blades through smoke. In the middle of the chaos, one of the Empire's capital ships exploded, its debris scattering across space. The shockwave hit several nearby vessels, disabling them instantly. Human ships moved through the wreckage like hunters in the dark. From orbit, human fleets looked like streaks of light carving through the void. Their movements were unpredictable, almost reckless, yet each strike hit exactly where it mattered. The Empire's commanders grew desperate. They fired planet-breaking weapons trying to turn the tide. But the humans had already scattered, regrouping to strike again. For every ship humanity lost, the Empire lost 5. The battle lasted for hours, then days. When it finally ended, the Empire's fleet was gone, destroyed or retreating into the darkness. The humans had done the impossible. They had survived not 1, but 2 invasions from the greatest power in the galaxy. News of the victory spread across the stars. On every colony, people celebrated, cried, and cheered. For the first time, they believed that they could truly stand against the Empire. The phrase, "we do not comply," became part of songs, banners, and broadcasts. Yet even as celebrations filled the air, the human leaders remained cautious. They knew the Empire would not accept defeat so easily. The next wave would be larger, deadlier, and more ruthless. Preparations began immediately. Scientists unlocked new ways to enhance human fleets, improving shields, weapons, and communication systems. Every nation contributed resources. There were no divisions now, only the shared goal of survival. At the same time, human intelligence teams intercepted Imperial communications. What they found shocked everyone. The Empire was not just angry, it was frightened. Their reports spoke of human technology evolving too fast to understand, of battles where their sensors could not track human ships properly, of tactics that defied logic. Some in the Empire's council began to whisper that humanity might be something beyond ordinary life. They feared what humans could become if left unchecked, and so they made a choice: extermination. But humanity had already made its choice long ago. The rebuilding of the fleets continued in silence. Deep inside shipyards orbiting the moons of Jupiter and Titan, engineers constructed new dreadnoughts, each one more advanced than the last. Their weapons glowed with a fierce blue light, and their armor was layered with energy-absorbing materials unknown even to the Empire. On Earth, the Terran Accord issued a single broadcast that reached every corner of human space. The Empire wanted obedience. they will find resistance. Every ship, every soldier, every soul stands for the freedom of our kind. The broadcast ended with a brief silence, followed by the sound of a rising heartbeat, a symbol of life that refused to stop. As weeks passed, the wreckage of past battles drifted silently through space. Among the broken Imperial ships, human scavenger crews worked tirelessly, collecting fragments of alien technology. Every piece was studied, understood, and repurposed. What once belonged to the Empire now served humanity. Even the stars seemed to watch as the balance of power began to shift. The Empire still had more ships, more weapons, and more worlds, but something had changed. For the first time in its long history, it had faced a species that would not kneel. The humans had shown that they could bleed, but they would not break. They could lose, but they would rise again. The Empire had demanded compliance. Humanity had answered with defiance. And in the quiet space between the stars, both sides prepared for what would come next, the fire that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The stars around the Vega system were still dim from the wreckage of war. Debris floated like silent shadows, remains of both human and Imperial ships. Each twisted hull was a memory of the battles fought, a reminder of how close humanity had come to destruction, and how far they had come by refusing to surrender. But there was no time to rest. The Empire's retreat had not ended the war. It had only made it more dangerous. Everyone knew that another attack was coming, bigger and stronger than before. The Empire would not accept defeat twice. On Earth, preparations never stopped. Factories that once built civilian transports now forged warships. Entire cities turned into production centers. The sky was filled with the streaks of shuttles carrying supplies and workers to orbit. Every nation worked together. There were no borders anymore, only one flag, one cause, one hope. In the orbiting shipyards, engineers stood shoulder to shoulder, covered in grease and sweat, building machines that looked like moving fortresses. The new ships were faster, stronger, and equipped with advanced technology developed from captured Imperial designs. The Terran Accord had learned much from the enemy. What had once been alien now became human. Every soldier trained with focus and fire in their hearts. They weren't fighting for glory. They were fighting for survival. Each one knew what was at stake. If humanity lost, everything they loved would vanish. On the other side of the galaxy, the Empire was also preparing. Their pride was shattered by 2 defeats, and their leaders were furious. They called humanity a chaos-born species, accusing them of using forbidden technology. To them, humans were not soldiers but dangerous anomalies that needed to be erased before they spread further. In secret chambers, the Empire's rulers planned their final strike. They built a massive invasion fleet, thousands of ships armed with weapons that could burn entire systems. They believed this would be the war that would end humanity once and for all, but they still didn't understand what they were facing. When word of the new invasion reached human command, there was no panic this time. Instead, there was silence. Calm, steady, determined silence. Every commander, every pilot, every engineer knew their role. There would be no retreat, no negotiation. Humanity would meet the Empire head-on, whatever the cost. Across the colonies, people gathered in public squares, watching as the fleets launched. Parents held their children close, whispering promises of peace that they hoped to keep. In schools, students drew pictures of the ships flying into the stars. The war had touched every life, but it had also united them in a way nothing ever had. Soon the Empire's fleet arrived. Its arrival was like a storm in the void, dark, massive, endless. Entire planets could see the glow of their engines lighting up the night sky. The air itself seemed to hum with fear. The Empire's broadcast came soon after. "This is your final chance," the voice declared, deep and sharp. "Submit and you may live. Resist and your worlds will burn." The humans listened, but no one answered. Instead, every ship powered up, their engines glowing blue against the darkness. The silence itself became their answer. The first attack began at the border of the Sirius system. The Empire unleashed a storm of energy that shattered asteroids and disabled several defense platforms. But before they could celebrate, the human fleet struck back. They didn't attack head-on this time. They attacked from the shadows, from angles the Empire didn't expect. Human ships used the gravity of nearby planets to sling themselves into new positions, striking from unexpected directions. They moved like ghosts, appearing and vanishing faster than sensors could track. The Empire's massive fleet struggled to adapt, their rigid formations breaking apart under pressure. In the middle of the battle, a single human ship charged straight into the Imperial line, drawing enemy fire away from the others. The explosion that followed blinded every sensor in range, giving the rest of the fleet time to regroup. That sacrifice turned the tide of the battle. Across space, the Empire's commanders began to realize something terrifying. Every time they thought they had learned the humans' strategy, the humans changed it. Every time they thought they had won, the humans came back stronger. The fight stretched across days. Entire moons became battlegrounds. Human troops fought on abandoned mining stations, turning metal corridors into war zones. The Empire's soldiers were powerful, but they fought by command. Humans fought by instinct. Every squad made quick choices, adapting to every surprise. At one point, the Empire tried to cut off the human fleet from its supply lines, but they were met with something unexpected. The humans didn't retreat to protect their supplies, they destroyed them instead, refusing to give the enemy anything. To the Empire, it made no sense. To humanity, it was simple. They would rather lose resources than lose freedom. When the Empire's flagships finally advanced toward the human core worlds, they expected a desperate defense. Instead, they found silence once again. The stars were empty, the radar quiet. Then, one by one, massive heat signatures appeared around them. The humans had been waiting in ambush. The space around the Empire's fleet exploded in light. The Terran forces had hidden entire battle groups inside asteroid fields, using advanced cloaking systems made from reverse-engineered Imperial tech. The moment the Empire entered the trap, hundreds of human ships opened fire. The void lit up like a storm. The Empire's front lines broke instantly. Their flagship tried to retreat, but human ships blocked every path. The humans were not just fighting. They were winning and doing it with calm precision. From orbit, it looked like a dance of fire and light. For every Imperial blast that hit, 3 more came back. Human voices filled the comms with short commands, no fear in their tone. The Empire tried one last desperate move. They activated a weapon that drew energy from a nearby star, planning to unleash it on the human fleet. But before it could fire, a group of human ships dove straight into the weapon's control structure, sacrificing themselves to destroy it. The resulting explosion tore through the Imperial lines, scattering their forces into chaos. By the end of the battle, the once great Empire fleet was reduced to fragments. Their ships drifted without power, their communications in ruins. When the last Imperial vessel vanished into the dark, humanity stood victorious again. But the victory felt different this time. It wasn't joy or pride that filled their hearts. It was realization. The war wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what kind of species they wanted to be. They had faced a power that ruled countless worlds, yet they had refused to bow. They had lost countless lives, yet their spirit only grew stronger. The Empire had come to teach them obedience. Instead, they had learned what unity truly meant. In the following weeks, the stars around the Sirius system were filled with the glow of repair lights. Human ships gathered survivors, rescued damaged vessels, and built new bases from the remains of destroyed ones. There was no celebration, only quiet respect for those who had fallen. The Terran Accord sent out a message across the galaxy, not to threaten, but to declare truth. We did not seek war. We sought freedom. The Empire demanded our silence. We answered with fire, but our fire is not to conquer, it is to live. That message spread far beyond human space. It reached worlds still under the Empire's rule. On distant planets, slaves and workers heard the broadcast and whispered in hope. The name of humanity became a symbol of resistance, and somewhere deep within the Empire's core, fear began to take root. They had fought humans as an enemy, but what they had unleashed was something far greater, a spirit that could not be chained. The stars grew quiet once again, but everyone knew it was only the calm before the next storm. The Empire would return, and when they did, humanity would be ready. Because once a species has tasted freedom, it never forgets. The stars across the galaxy seemed calm again, but everyone knew the peace was fragile. After the battles of Vega and Sirius, the Empire had gone silent. Their fleets no longer attacked and their messages stopped. Many thought they were preparing something far greater. Humanity waited, holding its breath, knowing the storm would come again. The Terran Accord kept every factory, shipyard, and defense line running day and night. The people no longer asked if another war was coming. They asked only when. Across Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies, humans trained harder, built stronger ships, and improved everything they could. Even the smallest mistake could cost lives, and no one wanted to give the Empire another chance. Everywhere there was unity. People of all backgrounds worked together as if the divisions of old Earth had never existed. Scientists shared discoveries freely, engineers solved problems side by side, and families sent messages of encouragement to those working in orbit. Humanity was no longer a collection of nations. It was one family standing against a common enemy. Still, there was fear. Everyone knew what the Empire was capable of. They ruled thousands of worlds and had technology beyond imagination. But what frightened people more was not their power. It was their silence. The Empire's quiet was unnatural. They never stayed still for long. Human intelligence networks spread deep into the galaxy, using captured codes and stolen frequencies to listen. For months, they picked up only fragments, strange signals, quiet transmissions, and occasional static bursts. Then one day something changed. A new signal came through, strong and clear. The Empire was moving again. A scout fleet on the edge of the Orion Belt confirmed it. Dozens of enormous ships had been sighted, their engines burning brighter than anything seen before. They weren't heading toward Earth yet, but their path was clear. They were regrouping and they were angry. The Terran Accord gathered once again in its grand hall beneath the ice of Antarctica. Commanders, scientists, and representatives from every colony stood together. No one shouted or argued this time. They all understood what needed to be done. The plan was simple but risky. Humanity would not wait for the Empire to bring the war to their doorstep again. They would strike first. Not for conquest, but to send a message that humanity would never bow again. The fleets began to mobilize. Thousands of ships left the safety of their orbits and jumped into the deep unknown. Each one carried men and women who knew they might not return. Yet none of them hesitated. For them, it wasn't about medals or history. It was about protecting their homes, their families, and their freedom. As the fleets moved into position, the humans could see the Empire's forces gathering near a cluster of stars known as the Dakaran Rift. It was a place filled with gravity storms and collapsing suns, a dangerous region no one dared to enter. The Empire believed it would give them an advantage. They were wrong. When the first human ships arrived, they didn't attack immediately. They stayed hidden, using the rift's chaos to mask their presence. For 2 days, they observed the Empire's movements, studying every pattern and weakness. Human intelligence had become their greatest weapon. They learned, adapted, and struck only when the moment was perfect. That moment came on the 3rd day. The Empire's fleets began to move deeper into the rift, unaware that hundreds of human ships had already surrounded them. Then, without warning, the silence of space shattered. A blinding flash tore through the darkness as the humans launched their first strike. The Empire's ships turned in confusion, firing in all directions, but the humans were everywhere. Their ships moved with speed and precision, slipping through the gravitational fields like they had trained for years. They targeted the Empire's communication vessels first, cutting off command between ships. Within minutes, the Empire's massive formation fell into chaos. Every explosion lit up the rift like a new sunrise. The energy storms reflected the light, creating an endless sea of fire and shadow. For the soldiers watching from afar, it looked like the heavens themselves were burning. The humans didn't fight for glory. They fought with purpose. Every move was calculated, every risk measured. When one ship was lost, another took its place. Even when surrounded, they never backed down. The Empire fought fiercely, trying to use their superior firepower to crush the smaller human vessels. But the humans used the environment itself as a weapon. They lured Imperial ships into unstable gravity wells and collapsing stars. Entire enemy squadrons vanished without a trace, pulled into the rift's deadly light. From the command center on Earth, people watched the live feed in silence. They could hear the faint crackle of comms, the voices of pilots shouting coordinates, and the constant rhythm of heartbeats echoing through the broadcast. It was more than a battle. It was history being written in real time. As the fight dragged on, the Empire's fleet began to crumble. One by one, their massive capital ships lost power, their shields breaking under the constant pressure. When the largest Imperial warship, a vessel the size of a city, exploded, the light reached all the way to the outer colonies. It was so bright that people could see it even from the surface of Mars. The humans had done it again. Against all odds, they had defeated an enemy that was supposed to be unbeatable. But victory came with a heavy cost. Thousands of lives were lost, and many ships were too damaged to return. The survivors drifted among the wreckage, their faces tired but proud. They had proven once more that humanity's spirit could not be broken. After the battle, the Empire's remaining ships fled, leaving behind only wreckage and silence. The galaxy watched in disbelief. A civilization that had ruled for millennia had been beaten 3 times by a species barely 1,000,000 years into spaceflight. Rumors spread fast. Across the Empire's territories, enslaved worlds began to rise up. People whispered about the humans, the free people of Earth, who had defied the greatest power in the galaxy. Hope began to spread like wildfire. Back on Earth, there were no parades or celebrations. The Terran Accord simply held a moment of silence for the fallen. In that quiet, they remembered what they were fighting for. Not vengeance, not power, but the right to live free. Every survivor of the Dakaran Rift carried that belief in their hearts. They knew the war was not over. The Empire was wounded, not defeated. But they also knew that humanity had crossed a line. They were no longer just defending themselves. They were changing the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, human engineers began to work on something new. A weapon so powerful it could end the war once and for all. They called it the Solaris Lance, a name whispered with both awe and fear. It wasn't built for domination. It was built to make sure humanity would never be threatened again. Across the stars, the Empire rebuilt in silence. Their leaders swore revenge, but deep down they knew the truth. The humans had become something they could no longer control. Their defiance had become a spark that might ignite the whole galaxy. And as the stars shimmered over Earth's night sky, every man, woman, and child looked up with the same thought. No matter what came next, they would never bow again. The Empire had demanded compliance. Humanity had answered with courage, unity, and fire. And now the galaxy was beginning to understand what those 3 words truly meant. We do not comply. In every corner of the galaxy, the news of the Empire's defeat spread like wildfire. Worlds that had once bowed before the Imperial throne now whispered stories of human courage and power. Those stories weren't written in fancy words or grand speeches. They were told by soldiers who saw the impossible happen, by traders who witnessed human ships moving like storms, and by citizens who realized that the invincible Empire was not so invincible anymore. The humans had become a symbol, not of conquest, but of resistance. And every planet under the Empire's rule began to wonder, if humanity could stand against the greatest power in the galaxy, maybe they could too. Inside the Empire's capital, the Senate halls were filled with shouting voices. Commanders argued about strategy, leaders demanded answers, and fear was hidden behind polished armor and strict words. The Emperor's Council wanted to erase the humiliation that humanity had caused. They planned a new campaign, bigger, stronger, faster than before. But their pride blinded them to the truth. They didn't see that the humans were no longer the small world they once mocked. The Terran Accord had grown united in purpose, their fleets forged by necessity, their minds sharpened by survival. The Empire sent new fleets to reclaim their lost honor. They thought their numbers would crush any defense. Massive ships the size of cities filled the darkness of space. Each one carried the mark of the Empire's pride, glowing symbols of authority. But humanity was ready. Across every human-controlled system, the call to arms spread. Not one colony hesitated. Men and women left their homes. Engineers powered up ancient engines, and pilots sat quietly in their cockpits, waiting for the moment when the stars would again burn. They didn't fight for glory. They fought for the right to live free. When the 2 forces met, the galaxy held its breath. The Empire's armadas stretched across the stars like an endless wall. Human fleets were smaller, fewer in number. But every ship carried a determination that no sensor could measure. The battle began with light, thousands of energy bursts crossing the void. The Empire's ships moved with precision, confident in their tactics. Yet once again, they underestimated their enemy. Human ships didn't fight by the book. They didn't follow old patterns. They used speed, unpredictability, and something machines couldn't calculate: instinct. One by one, Imperial ships began to fall. Not because they were weak, but because they were facing something they had never understood. Humanity fought as if every second mattered, as if every strike carried the weight of all who had lived and died before them. A single human frigate would charge headlong into a formation, drawing fire so the others could strike. When one ship fell, 3 more would appear from the dark. Every explosion painted the sky with fire, and that fire carried a message louder than any words. Humanity does not kneel. The Empire's admirals grew desperate. They ordered retreat, then regrouping, then attack again, but nothing worked. The humans didn't just win through weapons, they won through will. And as the battle dragged on, something even more dangerous happened. The news spread to the Empire's colonies. Billions of enslaved beings, who had served the Empire for generations, began to question why they obeyed. They listened to the intercepted human transmissions, and among the static, they heard a simple voice. Freedom is not given, it is taken. That message spread faster than any fleet. On distant worlds, slaves dropped their tools and raised their heads. Soldiers began to question their orders. Even imperial citizens started to wonder if their rulers truly had control. The Empire's biggest weakness was revealed. It wasn't the enemy outside their borders, but the doubt growing within. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity didn't celebrate. There were no grand parades or speeches. The Terran Accord knew the war wasn't over. The Empire was wounded but not defeated. Yet something had changed forever. Humanity had found its identity not as conquerors, but as defenders of freedom in a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant. Their scientists worked day and night, upgrading ships, building new defenses, and preparing for what everyone knew would come. The Empire's final retaliation. But for now, the galaxy was watching. On neutral worlds, citizens gathered in public squares looking up at projection screens showing the battles. They saw human ships darting through space, outmaneuvering giant Imperial cruisers. They saw courage where they had only known submission. Children on alien worlds started carving small models of Terran ships, calling them symbols of hope. Traders began wearing human-made badges, even though the Empire had banned them. The fire that humanity had lit was no longer theirs alone. It had spread across the stars. Every system that once feared the Empire now had a spark of defiance. Small rebellions began to erupt. Colonies stopped sending taxes to the Empire. Local militias refused Imperial commands, and in secret, rebel groups began contacting human channels, asking for guidance. The Terran Accord responded carefully, not promising war but offering knowledge, tools, and courage. Humanity understood the power of an idea. Once people believe they deserve to be free, no empire can stop them. Inside the Imperial Palace, the rulers could no longer hide the truth. The once proud Senate now sat in silence, watching reports of their fleets burning, their worlds rebelling. Their commanders spoke of humans not as savages, but as strategists, warriors, and thinkers. The Empire had awakened something it could never control. Some senators suggested peace talks. Others demanded total annihilation. But none of them realized that it was already too late. The galaxy had changed. Even those who had never met a human felt their presence. In markets, in factories, in the depths of alien prisons, the same phrase was whispered again and again. They fought back. It wasn't just about weapons or ships. It was about the spirit behind it, the belief that no power, no matter how great, could dictate the fate of another people forever. And as humanity continued to rise, they didn't speak with arrogance. They sent a single transmission to all frequencies, a message for every being listening in the dark. It said, "We will not rule. We will not obey. We will stand." Those words echoed through the stars, recorded, replayed, and remembered. Even Imperial soldiers, once sworn to silence, began secretly sharing it. The Empire had spent centuries building a wall of fear, but humanity had burned a hole through it, using only courage and the will to live free. The war was not yet won, but the galaxy had already shifted. No one looked at the Empire the same way again. Their commands no longer carried the same weight. Their symbols no longer inspired loyalty. And in the quiet corners of occupied space, hidden voices began to rise. They spoke of Earth, of the humans who faced the Empire and refused to bow. In the coming days, the Empire would prepare for its most desperate attack, gathering all its remaining power to crush the Terran Accord once and for all. But it didn't matter anymore. Humanity had already done what no other species had dared. They had turned fear into defiance and defiance into fire. And that fire now burned in the hearts of billions. The Empire had wanted compliance, order, and silence. Instead, it had awakened the most dangerous force in the universe, the human spirit. And no empire, no matter how mighty, could ever command that again. The final battle began not with noise, but with silence. Across the galaxy, countless worlds waited, holding their breath, knowing that what was about to happen would decide the future of everything. The Empire had gathered what was left of its power, fleets so massive they darkened the stars. Their leaders called it the Final Compliance War. Their goal was simple: destroy humanity completely, erase every trace of their defiance, and make the galaxy fear them again. But humanity had changed. They were no longer the small civilization the Empire once thought they could intimidate. Now they were united, every ship, every planet, every person ready to fight. The Terran Accord didn't speak of revenge. They spoke of survival, of protecting every world that wanted freedom. They had faced the Empire before and survived. Now, they were ready to end it. The human fleets gathered near the Dakaran Rift, a vast region of broken stars and shattered worlds. It was a place where gravity twisted light, where time itself seemed uncertain. For humans, it was the perfect battlefield. Their ships were smaller but faster. Their weapons were fewer but smarter. And deep within their command ship, a new weapon rested. A creation so powerful it was only to be used once. It was called the Solaris Lance. The Empire came in endless waves, confident as always. They filled the dark with their ships, their banners shining like golden scars across the void. Their commanders sent out a message to the humans, cold and proud. Lay down your weapons. This is your final chance to surrender. For a moment there was silence. Then the human reply came, not in words but in light. From the front lines, human ships moved with perfect coordination. They struck fast, then vanished into the dark, reappearing from impossible angles. The Empire fired back, their beams cutting through the black. But most of their shots hit nothing but empty space. The humans were fighting differently this time. They weren't defending, they were hunting. Every shot they fired had purpose. Every move carried the experience of countless battles. The Empire's commanders began to panic. Their formations broke. Their ships collided in the chaos. They were used to enemies who fled or begged for mercy, not enemies who fought with silence and precision. And in that confusion, humanity prepared their final answer. At the edge of the rift, the Solaris Lance activated. The weapon drew energy from a dying star nearby. For a few seconds, the whole battlefield dimmed. The Empire's ships paused, unsure of what was happening. Then a single beam of golden light cut through space. It wasn't loud or violent, it was pure and silent, like the universe itself taking a breath. The beam passed through the Empire's armadas, slicing through their ships as if they were made of smoke. One after another, their fleets disappeared into the light, leaving behind only fading trails of fire. When it ended, the darkness returned. Where the Empire's fleets had once filled the sky, there was now only emptiness. The humans stood in silence, their screens showing the impossible truth. The war was over. The Empire's power was gone. Their fleets had been erased in seconds. Across the galaxy, the transmission of that battle spread. Every world watched as the invincible Empire fell, not to destruction, but to the strength of those they had once called weak. The galaxy changed overnight. Worlds that had been under Imperial control for centuries broke free. Cities tore down banners of the Empire and raised their own. Former slaves walked into the sunlight for the first time, whispering words they had almost forgotten. We are free. On Earth, there was no celebration, no victory parade. Humanity had lost too much for joy. They had fought for survival and they had won, but the cost had been heavy. Yet even in their quiet sorrow there was pride. They had done what no one else could. They had faced the greatest empire in the galaxy and refused to bow. As the weeks passed, messages began to flood into human space. Leaders from newly freed worlds asked for guidance. They didn't want weapons, they wanted to learn how humanity had stayed strong. The Terran Accord sent envoys, not soldiers. They shared knowledge, technology, and hope. Humanity didn't try to build an empire of its own. They had seen what power could do, how it could twist even noble intentions. Instead, they became something different, a voice for those who couldn't speak, a shield for those who couldn't defend themselves. In time, even the remaining fragments of the empire came forward, not to fight but to ask for peace. Their leaders stood before the Terran Council and spoke words that no one had ever expected to hear. We surrender. Humanity accepted not with arrogance, but with quiet strength. They didn't demand tribute or territory. They simply said, "Learn what freedom means and protect it." Years later, the galaxy looked different. Trade routes reopened. Worlds once torn apart by war began to rebuild. People from countless species traveled to Earth, the planet once dismissed as a small blue world. They came to see where it all began, where a people once threatened with extinction had risen to reshape the stars. Statues were never built for the battles. Humanity didn't carve their victories into stone. Instead, they built schools, research stations, and gardens on the worlds that had once seen only fire. Children, human and alien alike, played under the same skies, learning stories of the war not as tales of hate, but as lessons about courage and unity. The galaxy began to call that time the Fire Era, not because of destruction, but because of what came after. The fire had burned away the chains, the fear, and the lies. It had given birth to something new, a time of cooperation. And at the heart of it all was Earth, the world that had once been told to submit. The message humanity had sent before the final battle was now remembered on every world. We will not rule. We will not obey. We will stand. Those words became more than a message. They became a promise that echoed through generations. But deep down, humanity never forgot what it had taken to earn that peace. In their museums, they kept the wreckage of old ships, fragments of hulls scarred by the war. Each piece carried a name, a reminder of those who had stood when others could not. Every year, at the same time the final battle had taken place, the lights across Earth dimmed for 1 minute. During that silence, the world remembered not just victory, but the cost of freedom. In the years that followed, explorers ventured beyond known space. They found new worlds, new civilizations, and new mysteries. Wherever they went, they carried the same lesson. That strength was not in weapons, but in unity. And though the empire was gone, its ruins still floated among the stars, silent reminders of what arrogance and fear could build, and how easily it could all fall apart when faced with courage. For humanity, that fire still burned, not to destroy but to guide. It burned in their hearts, in their stories, and in every step they took toward a future they had earned with their own hands. The galaxy no longer whispered about the humans with fear. Now they spoke of them with respect. They were not the conquerors of the stars, but their keepers. The fire they had once used to defend themselves had become a light for others. And so in the endless silence of space, one truth remained clear and unshaken. When the Empire demanded compliance, humanity answered with fire. And that fire became the light that would never fade.